Yes, it is I, and this will be one of those I'm in your face videos. Moro moro, and welcome back to Culinary Roleplaying. Come a little bit closer. I want to get a little bit... Yeah, that's better. I want to have your full attention. We need that deeper connection, you know? And I think I have done now my part, and your part is now just to do the thing. Push my buttons, if you know what I mean. Today I wanted to talk about an interesting dilemma and question that tabletop RPG community has been asking throughout all the years. And this question resurfaced into my consciousness when I watched a video from Questing Beast, which was called "You Shouldn't Use D&D for Narrative Campaigns." First of all, if you are not subscribed to Ben Milton yet, please do so. Questing Beast's channel is a treasure trove. I truly enjoy every single one of Questing Beast's videos. They are always very well informed. Even though they have a little bit more emphasis on OSR stuff, there is a lot of interesting information regarding to all aspects of tabletop role-playing games. And this specific video had a lot of interesting stuff. Ben gets in his own video into more detail on different aspects of how people see narrative in tabletop role-playing games. But today I want to focus on one of the research topics that Ben had, which was the Brennan Lee Mulligan's interview for Polygon. And I personally have really enjoyed the content Brennan Lee Mulligan has been involved in. I have enjoyed his GM style on Dimension 20. I especially respect him as an improvisational genius, in a sense that as another person who has done a lot of improv, I can really respect the amazing sense of timing that Brennan has. Because it doesn't make you interesting in improv that you can just spat out lots of funny sounding and interesting like talking points and speech. That doesn't make you funny or interesting. But what does make you interesting and funny in improv is your timing. How do you space your words? How do you space your attention? Meaning, where do you focus your eyes? Where do you focus your speech? That is called generally like attention. Where do you project your consciousness and show the audience like what are you focusing on right now? And this control of attention and the control of timing, Brennan just does a phenomenal job. And you can see the practice and experience he has on the field. But why I'm telling you this is because I fundamentally disagree with his statement in the Polygon article. And before I start to tear down everything he said on that article, I also fully understand. As a person who has given interviews to different news outlets, and as a person who has given out interviews to different news sources throughout the years, I know like 8 out of 10 times when I go to read an interview I was involved in, I always feel like, oh, really? That was the thing they picked up from our conversation? But that takes that thing out of, like, completely out of context. So now me picking up a certain point of the article is on argumentative side, it's not very efficient. So I can't really say for sure what did Brennan mean when he said these things, because we don't have all the contexts. But I would love to do a real interview with Brennan at some point. I would die as a fan as well. So Brennan, if you're watching this, probably not, but if you are, let's make an interview time, okay? I want to hear it straight from the horse's mouth. You're not a horse, or at least not always. Okay, back to the point. But I am here to make interesting content and talk about how I feel about and think about things. So just for the sake of conversation, I will pick out the quote from the Polygon interview that Brennan said and give you my thoughts about it. So question for Brennan was, why they decided to use D&D in their Let's Play podcast Worlds Payout number, because it is more combat oriented game. And the campaign they are playing is clearly more narrative driven, narrative based game. So why not use a game that has more narrative gaming mechanics? And according to Polygon, Brennan answered like this. This is direct quote from the article. Calling D&D a combat-oriented game would sort of be like looking at a stove and being like, this has nothing to do with food. You can't eat metal. Clearly, this contraption is for moving gas around and having a clock on it. If it was about food, there would be some food here. What you should get is a machine that is either made of food or has food in it. First of all, very weird analogy. Let's get back to that a little bit later. And it still continues. I'm going to bring the food. The food is my favorite part. People say that because D&D has so many combat mechanics, you are destined to tell combat stories. I fundamentally disagree. Combat is the part I'm the least interested in simulating through improvisational storytelling, so I need a game to do that for me, while I take care of emotions, relationships and character progression. Because that stuff is intuitive and I understand it well. I don't intuitively understand how an arrow moves through a fictional airspace. Well, first of all, I will address this directly to Brennan. Brennan, I have seen you in all of your college humor talk shows and stuff. And when you say that you don't intuitively understand how an arrow moves through a fictional space, when you have talked about how weird the logistics in Harry Potter world are, buddy, that's kind of stretch. Because you will definitely think about this stuff and you definitely would do it intuitively. You are that smart. So that's a really bad argument from you. But okay, what this makes me feel. Now I'm talking about feelings. This text makes me feel that Brennan feels like that the system rules can get into the way of the role-playing. That the idea is that there should not be mechanics in places where they are not wanted. And I can understand that. If you have a table full of improvisational professionals, they can create a story without having any narrative supporting mechanics in the game. They can just go on with it and turn on their drama brain and create scenes that are engaging and interesting. But is that playing a tabletop role-playing game anymore then? Are you then not just improvising? Because now you have clearly made a distinction between the gameplay, the battle game, and then just having an improv show. And having this weird separation between roleplay and the combat in D&D, for example, that was the aspect for me that drove me away from 5th edition. Why they have to be a separate thing? Why I feel like when I'm within the role-playing aspect that I'm playing the role-playing game, and when I'm doing the combat, then I'm just playing this tabletop combat game. Why I can't have a game that feels like a tabletop role-playing game all of the time? And I think that is the point of playing a tabletop role-playing game, that you have those unified mechanics that will help you create the story. Narrative story, action story, combat story, all the aspects should be supported by the rules, not either bog you down or make you do something else. So it really makes me want to say, when somebody says that I just want this very mechanical thing support my combat so I don't have to think about it, so I can focus on the story. I'm like, why are you playing this game then? Just go improv. You don't have to. You can't just improvise the combat. You can't just tell narratively what happens next. If that is the most important thing to you, saying that you need the combat, it's just bizarre. I feel like the combat is still like the final thing that it makes the game feel like tabletop role-playing game, you know? It would be an improv show, but just because there is the D&D combat in between, that's why it's a tabletop role-playing show or tabletop role-playing game. And yeah, I fundamentally disagree with that. For me, when I'm playing a tabletop role-playing game, all the aspects should feel the same. The game should flow forward the same way, whether you are adventuring, whether you are having a social interaction, or whether you are in between combat. This is my opinion. The game mechanics of tabletop role-playing game should not be there either to bog you down or to simulate something that you don't want to think about. Because I would say if there are mechanics like that, that's just a bad design. Tabletop role-playing mechanics should exist to support the roleplay of the player or players and help you to create unexpected outcomes. Unexpected outcomes with expected probabilities. And if we get back to this stove and food example, where I think the stove was kind of the game mechanic and the food was the roleplay. But like, I think role-playing games are so much more than just the food, because tabletop role-playing games create varied kinds of experiences. So in this example, if we could say that D&D 5th edition is a stove, the stove is very specified in creating food. And yeah, you could warm your whole house by using the stove, but it might not be that cost efficient. And yeah, you kind of can get some light out of the stove as well if it's like this kind of gas stove, but again, energy wise, it's not very efficient to illuminate the whole kitchen. And the food now in this instance is combat and combat oriented storytelling. And that's the people's argument, like, you clearly want to create a campaign podcast that focuses on different aspects than creating food. Like, let's say their aspect is clearly like more narrative. It's more like they want to create as much light as possible. So why use stove? Because stove is good at making food. And if you want a system that has a mix of like a little bit of everything, why not use like regular campfire or just make fire? Because fire, you get warmth, you can make food on it, and you can light up a location really nicely. Yes, it's not that efficient to solely make food with, but if you have like this more universal source of warmth, food and light, you could create a lot more rounded experience. And that, I think, is the arguments that people have for Brennan. But I think that is why people don't like theater kids in tabletop role-playing games in some instances, is because when something comes so naturally for them, which is role-playing, they necessarily don't realize that it's not something that comes really naturally for everybody. And they feel like game mechanics will ruin their fun, even though you can have really interesting narrative mechanics within your game. Let's take a good example, Hillfolk, which is solely based on having like these highly narrative elements within the game. And it's the theater kid role-playing game, but it still has some randomized mechanics. It still has interesting game mechanics that are focused on more creating the story. So just saying that D&D is best for us because, I don't know, because it doesn't have any rules for that, because we want to create rules ourselves, that's fair. But if you have a like group full of best improvisers in the world and you never have even used a system that would support that creative work, like my camera ran out of battery. Where was I? Maybe my point is that it's really a shame that professional people that have these high engrossing tabletop shows, they don't even try to take advantage of all the amazing rule systems that would complement their narrative craziness even better. Creating role-playing moments with mechanics that support your gameplay versus using systems that don't have any structure for narrative roleplay at all. They are very different things. Because when you are just role-playing without anything, that's just improv. That's not the same thing. Because the rules of the system are there to create a common ground, a common understanding between the players, or between the player and the rule system and the world, that will help people to navigate through that world. And of course you can create all the rules as you want, and you don't have to use any rules. You can always just create an improv show, or if you feel like you don't want your game to have any rules, that's fine as well. What it all comes down to in the end is exactly what Ben said in his video right around the end.
When it comes down to it, I think that Brennan's position makes sense. He knows what he wants out of a game, and he is using a system to help him do it. He's not saying that system doesn't matter, he's saying that it does, because 5e has voids where he wants those voids to be, and it has mechanics to help him cover his weaknesses. If you want to say that a narrative set of rules would work better for him, then you'd have to make the claim that its rules would serve his purposes better than the very sophisticated and finely honed set of improv rules that he has running in his head at all times. He's a professional improv actor, this is what he does. And ultimately, only he can be the judge of that.
And that is true. No matter what anyone else says about your game or your table, if every one of you have fun during the gameplay, yes, even the game masters remember that you are the part of the group as well, and you have to have fun as well. If you are not having fun while creating the game and while running the game for your players, then it's not worth doing. So if everyone has fun at the table, or you alone have fun at the table while playing the game, then it's a success. It doesn't need anything else. Then it doesn't matter what that form of play is called, or if that really is tabletop role playing or improvisation or playing a combat game. It doesn't matter, because in the end, if you are having fun, that is all that matters. End of story. But I really wanted to talk about this because I think making an argument like that is highly underselling the value that the game mechanics can have and affect your gameplay. And especially as a solo player, you really need those mechanics in narrative aspects as well. They really help you create the story because you are there alone talking to yourself or making internal conversations. So there it is even more important to have these very cool mechanics that will support the narrative as well. So just saying that, yeah, you don't need those and you can have as fun using any system, like, yes, but it is also a little bit disingenuous. But for all those people who just say that that group of people is doing everything wrong and they are using the wrong system, like, no, they're not. They're using exactly the system they want to use. And if you don't like the show, don't watch the show. Like it's not that difficult. But yeah, I fundamentally disagree. Even as a theater kid myself, if I want to play a narrative game with my friends, I want to have a game that supports and gives those mechanics. Like, why the frick would I play a combat-oriented game? Like, why would I play Lancer and try to play a court drama game with that? Like, why? If I would want to play 1920s horror game, why should I play Dungeons and Dragons compared to Call of Cthulhu if I have the book? Like, why? So yeah, in my humble opinion, it would benefit for these people to also play more narrative systems. Like, I agree on that sentiment, but ultimately it's their decision to decide what they want to play. I think this video will be the most disoriented one I have done so far, because I really didn't have like a certain script or sentiment I wanted to send through. I just really wanted to talk about the idea of, does it matter what system will you play. I will say this though, I will always play a crappy system with a good group, but I won't ever play a good system with a crappy group. So definitely, ultimately, the gaming group is what makes the game interesting if you are playing as a group play. So the system will have an effect, but it's not end all be all. But if I would want to warm my house or illuminate a forest around me, I wouldn't use a stove. I would use some other tool. But I think that's all for me today. So if you have fallen in love with me already, you can always join the Cleaner Roleplaying Guild. You can do that down below. And other than that, I think it's moro moro, and I hope I see you next time.